back in another week in the Parsha. We're another week in the Parsha over here. And this is PARSHAS VAYEITZEI. Tonight's shir is actually sponsored by Reuven and Chaya Goodwin and merit for Refuah Shlema for Fega Malka Bas Gittel Chana. She should have a Refuah Shlema B'Seich Shar Chole Yisrael amongst all the other sick of Klal Yisrael, speedy and a complete recovery. Be'ezus Hashem. There is a famous segula. Segula is a good thing that people do. And it's brought down by Rav Chaim Pelagi, and he said the following idea. If a person will go from the beginning of Rosh Chodesh Kislev all the way until Hanukkah, and they won't complain a single day, so he lost already. But if they won't complain a single day, says of Chaim Pelagi, then they should know that when Hanukkah will come, the Yeshuas, the salvations of whatever it is that they need in their lives, are going to be coming with the miracles of Hanukkah as well. If a person would find the wherewithal inside of themselves to keep that big Jewish mouth closed when they want to utter those words of complaint, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you held yourself back from expressing the complaints that are there festering up inside of you. I'm going to give you Yeshuas, I'm going to give you salvation and bracha and miracles in your life. Obviously, it's understood then that a person who's able to hold themselves back from complaining about the things that are going on in their life, they find a way to divert the conversation, they change and they shift the thoughts that are in their head to something positive instead of negative. That person is worthy of receiving, they are worthy of receiving the salvations, and they're worthy of receiving HaKadosh Baruch Hu's blessing and his grace as a result of such a thing. Although that the Jewish people throughout history have done just a wonderful and fine job complaining, we have no problem doing that. We look at ourselves throughout the Midbar, the wilderness, one of the things that we keep coming back to again and again and again in the Midbar is that Klal Yisrael complains. We know there's one word in Yiddish that you can never translate into English, and that's called kvetch. A Yid knows how, even the Persians don't even know what it means. But to kvetch means that it's in your very nature, it's in your kishkis, it's in who you are, that a person will complain about anything and everything that gets in their way. But a Jew is not supposed to be a complainer. A Jew is supposed to be someone who allows the situations of life to envelop them. Things will happen that will transpire in their lives. And instead of going to the basic way in which we normally act, which is to express our disgruntled feelings that we have inside and to express the disappointment that we have of what's going on, a person is supposed to hold themselves back, keep the mouth closed, and not to complain. Where do we learn this from? Where do we learn that a person who doesn't complain in this world is going to be rewarded with magnificent brachas and really salvations that are going to last until this very day? We know the famous story of Rachel and Leah. Rachel was the older daughter, Leah was the younger one, sisters. Yaakov Avinu is, we don't want to use the words, but there is a very deep ahava, a very deep love that he has for Rachel. As Chazal tell us, she was one of the most beautiful women around. But it wasn't just beauty in the eye of the beholder, there was a beauty in Maaseha, in her actions as well. And Yaakov Avinu was enamored by Rachel, and he wanted nothing more than to marry her. So says the Torah, and says the Gemara and Chazal as we go on, that Yaakov Avinu decides with Lavan that he's going to marry Lavan's daughter, Rachel Imenu. And they're concerned the entire time that Lavan is such a rush, is such a wicked man, that perhaps he's going to play some kind of a trick over here. So Yaakov and Rachel have simanim, they have signs with each other. And she says, listen, you'll know that it's me when you see the signs. If you don't see the signs at the night of the chasana under the chuppah over there, so then you'll know that it's not me and don't go through with the marriage. And Yaakov said, good, that's what we're going to do. Comes along the night of the chasana, and all the shmorg is out there, everybody's eating their sushi and their tacos in the sombrero, and the music is playing, and the strobe lights are blasting, and Rachel is ready to walk down to the chuppah, and Yaakov Avinu is doing his tshuva, and he's getting himself ready, he's davening for the future of all of Klal Yisrael. And right as they're about to go down, Lavan says to Rachel, you just stand on the side over here. I'm sending your sister Leah down to the chuppah instead of you. Leah's younger. You know, in our town, we always marry off the younger one. Leah is older, excuse me. In our town, we always marry off the older one before we marry off. It's amazing you just switch just like that. You marry off the older one, then instead of marrying off the younger one. And therefore, Rachel, my dear daughter, you're not ready to get married. Yaakov is going to marry your sister instead of you. Rachel now is in a quandary. Because her sister, who is overjoyed at this moment, she thought she's going to end up marrying Esav. Now she finds out she's marrying the holiest man in the world, Yaakov Avinu. Suddenly she goes from rags to riches in a moment. She goes from depression to happiness. She's soaring high. But Rachel knows that if she goes down to the chuppah and she doesn't know the simanim, she doesn't know the signs that she's supposed to give to Yaakov, Yaakov will call the chassan off in the middle of the chuppah. And what an embarrassment. What a shame it's going to be to Leah. So Rachel Imenu, at that moment, as her sister is about to waltz down the red carpet, down the runway, heading off into the chuppah, she says, my dear sister, you need to know that Yaakov's going to ask you for signs. Here are the signs. You'll be able to live happily ever after. The Midrash says a little bit differently. The Midrash says the following idea. There was no one more beautiful than Rachel Imenu. Because of her beauty, Yaakov Avinu wanted to marry her. And he sent gifts, very common in the olden days, as we find in the Gemara. They used to send savlanis, presents, to the bride that they wanted to marry. But Lavan, the father, took the gifts that Yaakov Avinu sent for Rachel, and he gave them to his daughter Leah. Now Rachel knew that they're coming for her. She knew very well that Yaakov Avinu wants to marry her, not Leah. So when she saw the Amazon guy arrive at the door, and she sees the box of sivlanos from Yaakov Avinu, the present from Yaakov Avinu, she knows it's for her. It says it on the package, for my wife Rachel. But Lavan quickly takes it out of the box and hands it over to his daughter Leah. Says the Midrash, V'haisa Rachel shosekes. And Rachel Imenu remained quiet. She did not say a word. Says the Midrash further over here, Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Kol yomai gedalti bein hachachamim. All of my life I was raised amongst the wise men of the generation. V'lo matzasi laguf toiv, I found nothing better for my body. Elo shesika, besides shtika, silence. The greatest thing that I found in my life was just keep it shut and just be quiet. Rachel tafse v'shtika, Rachel Imenu, she remained quiet. The Zara b'shtika, she was able to bring forth children in silence. She saw her gifts in the hands of her sister Leah, v'shaska, and she was quiet. Let's just ask ourselves the following question. Your name is Rachel Imeinu. Yaakov Avinu is the most prized bachelor in the entire universe at this point. You know that through Yaakov Avinu is going to come the future of all of Klal Yisrael. He's going to be the father of the Shvatim. They knew this. Rachel knew this. Leah knew this. As we see in Rashi clearly in the Parsha, they understood what was at stake over here. And you are the fairest maiden on the wall or of them all. And you know that Yaakov wants to marry you. Your father is a wicked man, and he starts playing tricks by the chuppah, by the chasana. Rachel Imeinu has a moment in her life where she has two choices. Either she is going to open up her mouth and begin to complain, wait a second. I'm the wife of Yaakov Avinu. These gifts belong to me. I'm not giving over the simanim, the signs to my sister over here. Let her get embarrassed. Or Rachel Imeinu is going to pick the higher road over here. And she's going to decide, like it says in the Midrash, Shosekes, I'm going to be quiet. I'm not going to utter and say a single word. I'm going to allow my sister to walk down to the chuppah. She's going to marry Yaakov Avinu. It's going to drive me crazy. There couldn't be a greater moment of jealousy, of disappointment, of frustration in a person's life than Rachel watching her sister take her husband. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not asking for complaints. HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want me to do something that's going to rock the boat. If I remain quiet, things will run the course. If I start complaining, it's going to be World War III. The Sefer the Sefer of Orchos Sadikim, the Sefer Orchos Sadikim, Pathways of the Righteous, has a chapter called Shtika, called silence. And he speaks over here at length, about silence. He writes at length all about the mila, the advantages that someone who is a silent person will have. And he quotes over here the Mishnah that we just said, that Rabbi Shimon Gamliel said, I grew up amongst the Chachamim and I found nothing better for my life than shtika, than silence. And then he quotes Shlomo HaMelech. Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon writes in Mishlei, Gam Evil Macharish Chacham Yechashev. A foolish person who knows how to remain silent will also be considered a wise man. Foolish people normally open their mouths and rant incessantly. Foolish people normally say things that are silly and ridiculous. But if a fool will keep his mouth closed and he remains silent, he then will be a person that is considered a chacham, wise. And therefore he writes, Oitem svasav novaim. If he seals his lips, he keeps that trap shut, says Shlomo HaMelech, then he will be considered to be a person of understanding. It means if you want to look smart and people are having a conversation, just sit there and look like this. If you look like that, you'll think, wow, this guy must be so smart. He has nothing to say. He must understand everything already. He figured it all out. He's not arguing about the inflation and the price of gas like everybody else is. He must have so many more important things going on in his mind right now. Just remain silent. But he says a beautiful idea. The Omar HaChacham, he quotes a wise man. And the wise man says the following. Kishani medaber, when I speak, as charet al ma she'amarti, I usually regret the words that I said. Kishani shoisek, but when I'm quiet, lo yescharet, I never have regrets. It's good for every husband to keep in mind. When I speak, the wife should keep it in mind as well. When I speak and I say words that I probably should not have said, it comes along with charata, with regret, because the words were released and you can't take them back. However, kshani shoisek, when I'm quiet, lo escharet, I regret nothing. V'mescharet al ashtika pamachas. And if I ever do regret being quiet, maybe once in a while, I thought I should have said something and I didn't say anything. Escharet al adibur pa'amim rabbis, you should know that when I speak, I have charat, I have regret many, many, many times. Once in a while, you're quiet and you should have said something. Should have voiced your opinion. You should have stood up for yourself. Okay, I have charat, I have regret, I didn't say anything. But if that's what it's like when you remain silent, he says, al achas kama v'kama, all the more so when I open my mouth and I say words that I shouldn't have said, the regrets never end. But he doesn't stop there. And he says further, Kishani medaber, when I speak, hu adibor moishel be, the words rule over me. Kimani medaber al adam davar she'eino hagun, if I start speaking about somebody else, something that's not so great about them, oisa adibor moishel be, those words then rule over me. And I end up going off the handle over here with the words that I use, and eventually I say things that are disgraceful about this person. I have to go now and humble myself and grovel and ask Mechila, can you please forgive me for the words that I said about you? When I don't speak, I rule over my words and those things that I wanted to say, and I can turn away from any conversation that I don't want to get myself involved in. Says the Orchai Tzadikim that if a person wants to have a real strength in their life, a person wants to live a life where they will have no regrets, then they should learn how to be quiet. They should learn how not to talk too much, because whenever we talk too much, inevitably we will say things that we wish that we never said before. In our generation, it's about 1,000 times worse, because there's texting, there's WhatsApping, there's Instagramming, there's emails, you name it. A person just sets it off. Now that you have the voice note, it's too late. Once you let go of the record, that's it. It's gone. It's into cyberspace, and whatever you said, whether you like it or not, it's going to be heard by the other person. Chazal are teaching us over here that the proper way for a person to behave in their life is the person who doesn't talk too much. And when you do have to talk, you have to be in control of your words. And if you can't be in control of your words are going to be in control of you. The mouth is moving faster than the thoughts can come out of your head. The Vilna Gaon when I think they say when he hit 40 years old, his mind worked so fast, and the words of Torah were flowing out of his mouth so rapidly, his hand could not keep up with the speed of light thoughts that he had in his mind. So he had to have many students sitting around him all of the time. And when he would begin telling over, the Gemara means this, and the Pasuk means this, and the Shulchan Aruch means this, he had groups of people that were writing down as fast as they could, because that's the only way they could keep up with everything that was coming out of his mouth. We're like the exact opposite. When it comes to words of Kedusha, when it comes to words of Torah, our mouths move like they are in slow motion. It takes a lot to get those words out of our mouth. Oh, but when it comes to talking about, you name it, politics, Biden, our friends, our family, the guy down the street, that annoying guy in the shul who's always, the guy who's, when he goes like this, his belt is always banging into the stender. How did that guy make it to every minyan in the morning? So we have no problem talking about these people, and our mouths are moving and moving and moving and moving. Say Chazal and our Chachamim, keep your mouth closed, because you're going to say something that you're going to regret. And when those words come out, you can't take them back. when you when you press send on the text or on the email, and it goes out into cyberspace at the speed of light, you can't take it back. And you'll end up groveling, perhaps for the rest of your life as a result of those words. Rachel Imeinu is standing at a crossroads in her life. She's been waiting and waiting. They knew about Yaakov and Esav. She knew that there's a young man whose name is Yaakov Avinu, and he's going to come back to their hometown and pick a wife from his family. And she knew she's the one that's supposed to marry Yaakov. He's the younger one. Leah is supposed to marry Esav. She's the older one. She sees Yaakov at the well. It's love at first sight, as we would say. She knows she's going to get married to this man. And through her and him is going to come all the children of Klal Yisrael. And Lavan says, not so fast. Your sister's going in front of you. In front of me for what? She's going to get married to your husband. The man that you desire, the man that you are dreaming about, the man that you can't wait to settle down with and raise a family, she's going to take him instead of you. Says the Midrash, Rachel at that moment, she was shoy sekes, she kept her mouth closed. And that's what it says in the Pasuk. Later on in the Parsha, after Rachel Imeinu watches her sister Leah have one child after another with Yaakov Avinu, and she is going out of her mind right now. What's going to be if my sister has too many children, and Bill has children, and Zilpah has children, the maidservants? Who am I going to have? What child am I going to have for Klal Yisrael? Vayizka Elokim es Rachel. Hashem remembered Rachel. Vayishma Eleha Elokim. He heard her. Vayiftach es Rachma, and he opened up her rechem. He opened up her womb. Says Rashi, Vayizka Elokim es Rachel. What does it mean that he remembered Rachel? He remembered that she gave over the simanim, the signs, to her sister. And the way that we're learning this midrash over here, it's even more than that, because the midrash is going on these words, Vayizka Elokim es Rachel. He remembered her silence. He remembered that she didn't complain. He remembered that she didn't say a word. She didn't even gripe and groan to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. She watched her sister walk down the chuppah, and she stood there with tears in her eyes. And we might even be able to say that they were tears of joy because she was able to watch her sister go to the chuppah with the man that her sister wanted to marry as well. If a person remains silent, and they don't be that kvetcher, that complainer against HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so they are zeichet to many, many things. As it says over here, v'tahar v'teiled ben, she conceived and she gave birth to a son. V'toimer, and she said, Asaf Elokim es cherpasai, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, cherpasi, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has removed my shame and my embarrassment, because she was the only one of the women in the life of Yaakov Avinu at that point that didn't have children, and she wanted so badly to be a mother of Klal Yisrael. So now remember, Yosef, she's exclaiming over here, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Asaf has removed my embarrassment and my shame. Vatikra Shemo Yosef. And then she calls him Yosef, which means Lamor Yosef Hashem li ben acher. Give me another son, Hashem. So what's his name? Asaf, which means that Hashem removed the shame? Or is it Yosef that Hashem should increase over here? Rachel Imeinu said to herself the following: I was silent. I didn't say a word. I let my sister walk down to the chuppah. I even gave her the simanim. I gave her the signs. She wasn't embarrassed. She wasn't shamed. She was able to marry Yaakov Avinu. I stood by here for years already, waiting for the schus to have one of the children of Yaakov Avinu. But I'm running out of time, because there's already 10 other children in the life, and 10 other boys. There's only 2 that's left. What's going to be? So she pushed the envelope and she said, Yosef li ben Acher, I'm not going to sit by and be satisfied with only one son. I want you to add another son for me. And sure enough, Rachel Imenu has a son whose name is Binyamin. It's the last child, the last of the children that Yaakov Avinu ends up bringing into this world. When you are a shoysek, when you are someone that is quiet, when you don't gripe and complain against the Ribono Shel Olam, what does it mean when you complain? When a person complains, that means we are saying, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you do not know what you're doing. Because if it was up to me, I would do things differently. You did this, I don't know why you did that. Doesn't make any sense to me. You did this, Hashem, why didn't you ask me for some advice first? If you'll ask me for advice beforehand, I'll tell you what to do in my life. A complainer is someone who doesn't think that HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows what he is doing. Rachel Imenu said, I know what you're doing, Hashem. I'm not so thrilled right now with what's going on, but I know that you always know what you're doing. And I'm not going to complain. And now you gave me a child. I didn't complain before. I gave my sister the signs. Now you gave me a child. There's only one son left for Yaakov Avinu. Yosef li ben Acher, I want you to give me another one. Yosef means give me more. I want you to give me more children, so I should be zeicher to be counted amongst Yaakov's wives as bringing the shift they call the tribes into this world. When you don't complain, you are zeicher to Yeshua's to salvation, like Rav Chaim Pelagius says. You don't complain the whole month of Kislev, which leads us to the Yom Tov of Hanukkah. Hanukkah itself is the Yom Tov. We are lahoidos ulahalel. We don't complain about anything. On the other hand, lahoidos, we thank Hashem, ulahalel, and we praise Hashem. Instead of complaining, we have to learn how to praise. Instead of groaning and being grumpy, we have to learn how to say, thank you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for everything that you do in my life. I don't understand. I'm not sure why. It doesn't always make sense to me, but that's because I'm not Hashem. You are Hashem. And you know exactly the way that things are supposed to look. The Orchos Tzadikim says towards the end of this chapter, Klalo Shel Davar, the general principle is of shtika, of silence, the following. Like a person makes a door to his house. There are times to open the door, there are times to close the door. So too a person should learn how to close the doors of his mouth. There are two doors that a person has. Hasfasayim, the lips, v'hashinayim, and our teeth. Just as you close the door when you don't want anybody coming in, and just as we used to, before we moved to Los Angeles, we lived in a place called Yeshiva Lane. One of the most exciting parts of Yeshiva Lane was for the children that it was like free reign over the entire neighborhood. They would just run out the door whenever they wanted to. They would run into the woods. They would run into the wilderness. They would run into the park. It was torture for a parent. You never knew sometimes where your kids were. So we said, you know what? We're going to start locking the door, and then that way the kids won't be able to get out. So the door came with a regular lock, and we locked the door. And my son, clever little boy, he stands on his tiptoes and he takes off the chain and he runs out the door. So we call the locksmith, say, listen, can you do us a favor? Can you please raise the lock on this door so that my son can't get out when we don't want him to? No problem. Comes along the locksmith. He puts in a lock higher up and we close the door behind him. And I say to my son, now you're stuck. So I walk into the other room and my son is looking at the door. And he realizes that if he just pulls a chair over to the door, so then he will be able to open up the lock. And the next thing I know, he's gone like the wind. So we call the locksmith back. We said, listen, you need to make it all right. By the end of the time that we lived in yeshiva, the lock was like so high up, I had to stand out of a chair to open up the door when I wanted to get out of there. We lock the doors to keep things out. We lock the doors to keep people, to keep things in. We lock the door to keep the cold out. We lock the door to keep the heat and the warmth inside of our homes. Says the Orchos Tzadikim, you have a mouth, you have lips, you have teeth. Those are the doors to your mouth. And you have to learn how to keep your mouth locked up sometimes. And don't complain to Hashem. Don't kvetch. Don't grovel. And don't have gripes. And don't have tainas, as we call, don't have complaints. One of the beautiful things in the Tanoim that we write by a chasana, the Ashkenazim, they do what's called Tanoim. They're the conditions that the two fathers make between themselves, basically to agree that we'll make sure that this young couple is going to go down to the chuppah together. One of the things that it says in those Tanoim, in the conditions, is Ein lanu tainos zeh, we have no complaints against each other. No complaints. Because as everybody knows, in a relationship, when you have complaints, it ain't so fun to be in that house. Everybody knows that when you begin to shepherd with each other and to grovel with each other and to complain with one another and to one another, and you open up that mouth, then we become, like it says over there, the Chacham, the wise man says, every time that I open my mouth and I said the wrong thing, I only have regrets. And then you only have regrets. And the words become in charge of you. You ever have a conversation? Should have been about 30 seconds. It turns out to be 3 hours long. How does that happen? Because the words control you. You do not control your words. Rachel Imenu was a woman who was at a moment in her life where her whole destiny was shifted and changed. She had every reason in the world to complain, to be upset, to be angry, to say, Ribbon Hashem, what are you doing to me? She remained silent. And in the schus, in the merit of her silence, she has a son. And the son's name is Yosef HaTzadik. Yosef is the brother who saves all of Klal Yisrael. Yosef is the one who goes down to Mitzrayim. Yosef is the one who eventually is the Siba, is the cause for all of Klal Yisrael being formed in Mitzrayim, in Egypt, which eventually leads to the Yitzhak, to the Exodus, which eventually leads to our Sinai receiving the Torah, which eventually leads us into Eretz Yisrael, to the building of the Beis HaMikdash. If you're silent, HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends you Yeshuas, he sends you salvations. And the salvations that he sends you could be in mass form, could be gigantic beyond what it is that a person imagined. And this is like we're saying, this is really, as we come to the miracles of Hanukkah, Hanukkah is about lahaydais ulahalil, about giving thanks and gratitude to Hashem. A person who is busy using their mouth for gratitude, for thankfulness, and for praising, they don't have any time to sit around and complain. A person who sits around and complains all day long has a very hard time finding the true good that is there in their life. The moment that a Jew wakes up in the morning, the first words out of their mouth are, Maida ani lefanecha melechai v'kayom. Let me be Maida, let me thank you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that you woke me up another day in my life. Which means that if you wake up in the morning, you already have a lot to be thankful for. Because there's plenty of people who did not wake up this morning. And there's a lot of people that are not awake right now. That's a joke. So if I wake up in the morning and I'm able to express my gratitude and my thankfulness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so then I start my day, I train myself in the world of Haidah, the world of being thankful. And the more that a person will stand there and they will thank Hashem and all of the brachas, all of Birchas HaShachar, all the blessings we make in the morning, we starting with Birchas HaTorah. We're thanking HaKadosh Baruch Hu, thank you for giving me the Torah. I don't talk about what I don't have. I talk about what I do have. Birchas HaShachar, the long list of blessings that we go through. Pokeach Ivrim, thank you Hashem, you opened my eyes. Thank you Hashem, you straightened me out. Thank you Hashem, you put clothes on me. Thank you Hashem, you spread out the world in front of me for me to take steps on. Every single bracha is a bracha of gratitude to the Ribbono Shel Olam. So the whole way that a Jew starts their day is the way that it's supposed to go from beginning till end. Use your mouth for the right things. Just say, thank you, Hashem. Gratitude, that's really, we learned in this week's Parsha as well. Leah realizes that Hashem gave her so many children. And she said, Apam oides Hashem, this time I'm going to now open up my mouth and praise Hashem and thank Hashem. I got more than I bargained for. And the reality is for us, we always get more than we bargained for. We're undeserving. We haven't done anything magnificent that we deserve the greatest things that Hashem gives us. And therefore, just waking up in the morning is already cause to say, thank you, Hashem. I really, really appreciate it. And when a person trains their mouth to speak in the positive, and they train their mouth to be quiet from the negative, and they're always looking for the ways, they're looking for things that they could find. I always tell Chassanim men that are getting married, when you go home, you need to always be looking for ways that you can praise your wife. She needs compliments. She's looking for compliments. She wants them. You should not have a day that goes by where you don't at least give your wife 3 complimentary gestures and statements, whether it's how delicious the fish sticks and tater tots were, or how nice the house looks, or how wonderful it is to come home to a smiling face like yours. But whatever it is, you have to compliment, because compliments breeds positivity. Not complaining, holding your mouth back, it brings positive brachas to your life. Rachel Imenu had to bite her tongue and her lips and grind her teeth not to say a word at that moment. What was she zeichet to? What did she merit in the end? Vayizke Elokim HaKadosh Baruch Hu remembered, and he said, I'm going to give you a son. Not Stam, not any son. I'm going to give you Yosef, who probably undeniably is the one son that is looked at as carrying on the legacy of his father Yaakov Avinu. And I'll give you a son Benjamin that in his portion in Eretz Yisrael, the Beis HaMikdash is going to be built. And this son, Yosef, he is going to be the precursor for all of the building of Klal Yisrael. All because you kept your mouth closed and you didn't utter a single complaint. I saw a Maisa story recently of a fellow in Eretz Yisrael who was going through very hard times. He seemed every week it was something else. Another part of his life was falling apart. First it was his job, and then it was couldn't pay the rent, and then it was his sickness, and then it was this, and then he had daughters. He had 3 daughters, I believe. They were all getting older. Not a single one of them was getting married. All of their friends were getting married, having children, going on with life. They were not getting married. And this man was so miserable. And he was fetching around all day long. How could Hashem do this? How could Hashem do that? I have nothing now. Parnas is no good. My children aren't getting married. The health is not good. So one day he was complaining to one of his friends. And his friend said, you need some help. He said, why don't you go to the Ger Rebbe? I think that it was the Pnei Menachem. Go to the Ger Rebbe. He's very good with these things. Maybe he'll give you a segula, maybe he'll give you an eitzah, maybe he'll give you some advice. Go to him and ask him. So this man wasn't a chassid, and he was very leery about going to the Rebbe. He said, just go. He's a great person. You'll see. And the man comes into the Pnei Menachem's private chambers, and the Rebbe says, what can I do for you? And the man starts going off on his long list of complaints. I lost my job. I have no parnasa. I can barely hold on to my apartment. I have 3 daughters. They're getting older. My oldest daughter is 28 years old already. She's not married yet. We're not even getting calls for shidduchim. One of my wife got sick, and this and all the different things. So the Rebbe looks at the man and he says, 60-40. Shishim arba'im. And the man says, "What? Those are the winning lotto numbers tonight? What does that mean?" So the Rebbe says to him, 60% of the words out of your mouth should be gratitude to Hashem. 40% only can be complaints. And the man says, what? And he tells him, you complain way too much. You don't realize how much good you have in your life. From now on, 60% of all of the words that come out of your mouth, you use them to praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu for all the blessings you have. 40%, if you're inclined, you can use that for your complaints. Man looks at the Rebbe. He was hoping for something a little bit quicker fix than that. And the Rebbe says, that's it. 60-40. Bracha b'atzlacha. The man walks out of there and he's about to start complaining. I went to the Rebbe. And then he remembers 60-40. And he says, thank you, Hashem, that I came to the Rebbe and he gave me this piece of advice. 60-40. And the man felt a little bit better. It feels good to be positive and to recognize the good. And he goes on like this. And every time that he was about to complain, he remembers 60-40. And he starts praising Hashem. He wakes up in the morning and he starts going through all the things that he has in his life. Rabbi Dovid Miller's Zatzal, he used to have a list of all the different sicknesses that were out there in the world. And every day he would go through that list and he would say, Baruch Hashem, I don't have that. 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 I don't know. He would go down the whole list. Baruch Hashem. I'm a healthy man. Baruch Hashem. And then he would extol his gratitude to the Ribono Shel Olam. Rabbi Dovid Miller was once by a chasana, by a wedding of one of his grandchildren. And I guess it's his nephew by marriage, Rav Simcha ben Cohen, sees him by the chasana. And Rav Simcha ben Cohen is one of the big poskim here, one of the great halachic authorities in America. And he had a long list of questions to go and ask the Zayda, Rabbi Dovid Miller. And he comes over and he says, Rebbe, says, can I ask you some shilas, some questions? So Rabbi Dovid Miller was pacing back and forth by the wedding hall. And he looks at me and he says, if it's an emergency and you need the answer right now, yes. If it can wait, then I'm very busy right now. So Simcha ben Cohen says, I mean, they're not emergencies, just questions that I've been gathering up, but Zayda, you're by yourself and you're just pacing back and forth. How are you so busy? He said, I'm by the chasana, by the wedding of my granddaughter. I'm thanking Hashem that my granddaughter is getting married tonight. And I'm thanking him for all the hashkacha that must have gone in to this shidduch. So if Cohen looks at him, Okay, how long does that take? He says, but once I'm thanking Hashem for the marriage of this grandchild, I'm thanking Hashem for the marriages of all my grandchildren today. And that's why I can't talk to you right now, because I'm busy thanking Hashem. And this man in our story got so comfortable and he became so skilled in the world of gratitude and thanking Hashem. He noticed that all of the things in his life that were falling apart, all the things that he was complaining about, suddenly gets a job. Suddenly can pay the rent. His wife, who wasn't feeling well, she goes to the doctor, she's fine. And his 28-year-old daughter, a month later, she becomes a kala. 2 weeks later, the other one becomes a kala. 3 weeks later, the other one becomes a kala. And that's it. Within 3 months, they're all married. Because when a person learns not to complain, which is negative, and they live in the world of positive, of haidah, of gratitude to Hashem, Hashem brings the Yeshuas, He brings the salvation. And that's Rachel Imenu taught us. Rachel Imenu taught us, as hard as it is to not say what you want to say right now, and to complain to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for all of the injustice in the world, what greater injustice could there be than that? I'm not going to complain. Shasekes, I'm quiet, and in my silence, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you know and I know, and therefore you're going to bring the salvation at the right time. Vayiska Elokim as Rachel. Hashem remembered Rachel. What did he remember? He remembered her silence. And he brings a son, and she says, this is not just any son, who removed my shame. It's Yosef ben Acher. Give me more, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And he said, you know what? I will. Because when you don't complain and you praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings salvations. We should be zeicha, each and every one of us has plenty in our lives that we could find to complain about. Everybody has things to complain about. But the message of the evening is, don't complain. You gain nothing, you only hurt yourself. Because when you complain, you'll end up having charata, you'll have regret. You'll have to go and grovel to somebody else that you embarrassed them. And eventually you have to come and you'll have to apologize to Hashem. That Hashem, you give me so much and I chose to focus in only on the negative. So if I learn how to say thank you and to give gratitude and praise to Hashem, then that is also the greatest preparation that we can have for the Yom Tov of Chanukah, which is literally around the corner, which the entire Yom Tov is Lahaydais Ula Halil. We say Halil every single day, full Halil. You only do that by Sukkot. Even by Pesach, we don't say a full Halil every single day. We say a full Halil. There's no mitzvah of Seudah, of eating the meal, unless at the meal you say words of Torah and Shiros v'Sishbachos, and you sing songs of praise and gratitude to Hashem. The whole Yom Tov is Yehuda HaMaccabi. Yehuda itself is the language of gratitude and praise. And therefore, if we learn how to follow in the ways of our great matriarchs and patriarchs and the leaders of Klal Yisrael, and instead of using the speech for the negative, but rather expressing the positive in words of praise and gratitude and thank you, Hashem, for everything that you've done. I was by a chasana of a good friend of mine, and he's had a hard life beyond belief. Nobody could imagine the tortures that this man has gone through in his life. From the time that he was a child, all the way up until the present, in so many different areas, psychologically, emotionally, physically, I don't even know all the stories, but everything that I know, it's too much for a human being to be able to exist. But he keeps going, and he keeps plugging away. And yes, he has days where he complains, and he has days where he is down, and he has days where he doesn't understand why HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought so many challenges in his life. But he married off his son. And he did not have an easy time with this particular child. A very bumpy, rough road in many areas. But at that chasana, the simcha that this man had, which I've never seen before in my life, he was literally leaping out of his skin. And one of the most beautiful moments of the wedding was he jumped on stage with the band and they were singing the song, "Thank You, Hashem." Dun, 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 "Thank You, Hashem." Yeah, everybody knows this song. He grabs the microphone out of the hand of the singer. And with all the gusto from the bottom of his heart, he is screaming and he is singing, "Thank you, Hashem." And the whole place is watching. Everybody knows what this man has been through. And he's just thanking Hashem for everything. That elevated state that he was in lasted for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks after the chassan. He could not come down to the ground. Because when you learn how to thank Hashem for everything, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you're up here, the Yeshuas, the salvations, the brachas, whatever you want, it's going to come your way. We should be Zeichem Yetz Hashem to learn how to say thank you, Hashem. To praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when you wake up in the morning, say it like you mean it. Thank you. I admit to you, I'm gracious to you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that you gave me another day of life. When you're ready to complain, find something that you can be thankful for. Instead of the negative, say the positive. And say one positive, say another. 60-40 will become 70-30, 80-20, 90-10. It'll become like 99-1. You'll feel so much better when you're being positive and saying the right things. You'll feel miserable when you're complaining and saying the wrong things. You'll want to be the person who is shosekis, who is quiet like Rachel, someone that is that will admit to HaKadosh Baruch and be gracious like Leah, and will be like the Maccabees of the story of the Hanukkah, where we don't focus in on what we don't have. What did they have? They had nothing. Klal Yisrael was decimated. Everybody was misyavnin, everybody had assimilated. The army was 13 Kohanim against the entire army of the Greeks. Did they say, what are we going to do? We're so small, we don't have, no. They said, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we're here for you, Hashem. And we know that you are behind us. And we know that you can win any battle. And we are grateful that we have an opportunity to be Mekadosh Shem Shemayim, to sanctify Hashem's name, make salvations, Hashem. And Hashem made miracles after miracles after miracles. And that's our Hanukkah. We should be Zeichem Yetz Hashem to have miracles in our own lives, instead of complaining about the things that we all just love to complain about. In the things that seem to be so terrible, why don't we find something that's actually very good and thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for that? And in that source and that merit, Hashem should bring the Yeshuas to all, each and every one of us. Amen. You're welcome.